So up next, we're going to go to our first panel. So you're not getting a break yet. You can go grab a coffee. Again, as I mentioned, if you're watching online, we know I can see all the participants. I can't see you. I know that you're there though. You can get up. You can come in and out of these kind of sessions. But up next, we wanted to talk a little bit about success stories in the pandemic. And it seems like a strange thing, right? But we have 4 great business leaders who are going to take the stage and share some of their pandemic pivots. And so, as always, we've got Mariette Muller. I can see Mariette now. I think she's in her living room, Mariette. And Mariette's going to be is going to be our moderator for our next session. Mariette, of course, everyone knows Mariette. She, of course, is the president and CEO of World Trade Center Winnipeg. She's going to be the moderator for our next session. So I'm going to throw it to Mariette on her couch, probably somewhere in St. Boniface. And Mariette will take our next session with some of our great business leaders from throughout Manitoba.
Merci. I don't have my logos behind me. I didn't know quite how to do it. So next time I'll have as many as you, Chuck.
First of all,
thank you, Chuck. This day, this day has started so well. And I have to say, I've been working with your team. Efficient, polite, nice to work with. So bravo to everyone there. So yeah, I really wanted to make sure that everybody knew how well the team has been working. And I just have this little piece. So imagine the rest of everybody. So I've got a great gang this morning that I'm so pleased to be able to talk about, because in the beginning, Chuck talked about how difficult they had been for many businesses, but that there are some, and I'm hoping more and more and more that we haven't even heard about yet, that have found a way to pivot or have found a way to take advantage of this really crappy situation. So I've got 4 today that are one of those, and I'll introduce them one by one. I just want to say one little thing before I start kind of bragging a little bit, but check out my beautiful suit and my dress. These are both products from Muller Creations that you'll hear about. I had to say it. So now enough about me. We're going to start. We're going to start with the four ones that I'm going to go through. First with Martin Petrak. Then I'll go with Andrea Muller-Dantonneau. Then I'll go with John Sparrow, and then I'll go with Nate Caston. Okay? And I'll go pretty much with the same story. Now, I know you guys, 4 of you have to speak, so please be as concise as possible. But people want to know your story. So I'm going to start with you, Martin. If you can give us just who are you? What company do you have? And what kind of year have you had? And what kind of pivots have you done in this last year? Martin, go for it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Mariette. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I'd first like to start by thanking the Chamber, Chuck, for inviting us to this opportunity to speak and tell you a little bit about our story. It's been an absolute whirlwind. So Precision ADM is located here in Winnipeg on Buffalo Place. We are an advanced manufacturer. So we manufacture spine implants to turbine parts using metal 3D printing. Most of our business is located elsewhere, of course, as we're a major exporter. But as you can imagine, back in early 2020, the pandemic hit all of us. We basically had to change our overall business plan because we focused on aerospace. We saw what happened to the aerospace and domestic flying. It basically turned down significantly. Secondly, we had a problem because a lot of our elective surgeries all stopped. And so when you're selling implants and you're selling airplane components, that's a big problem for us. However, we focused a lot of our company on innovation, on engineering, regulatory requirements, etc. And we started getting calls from Shared Health and WRHA asking about medical supplies, medical devices, etc. We said, well, we're pretty good at making medical devices. Well, what are you thinking? And so they started coming up with different ideas, and swabs and masks all of a sudden became a real concern for us and frontline workers to keep them safe. So very, very quickly, we ended up pivoting our technology in 3D printing from metals to plastics. And we very, very quickly commercialized Canada's first nasopharyngeal swab, got it through Health Canada, where we started manufacturing up to about 500,000 a month for Manitoba. And then we very, very quickly pivoted to the federal government because the federal government was also requesting these swabs to be manufactured in Canada. So we then commercialized the swab and now sold to Manitoba and the federal government. At the same time, though, there was also a strong need for domestic secure of N95 level respirators. At the same time, the government of Manitoba was looking for respirators. So we pivoted our company at the same time to start manufacturing respirators. So in a very short period of time, our organization and young engineers here put together a plan, and we then commercialized Canada's first medical, reusable, environmentally friendly elastomeric respirator. And that is now being used in Manitoba. Over 30 million uses are being planned and going to be delivered within the year. As well as at the same time, we are now selling these products in Ontario. And while doing this, we also ramped up a 3-ply manufacturing line for surgical masks and medical masks that you see, where we're now manufacturing millions of these masks. So we've went from about 20 employees in 2020, in about March, April of 2020 to 175 now. We plan on adding another 40 employees over the next little while to deal with the growth, not only domestically here in Manitoba, but across the country, as well as into the US. So in a very, very short period of time, we had to kind of pivot from making aerospace parts and spine implants to making masks. But it was all very dependent on, again, the same type of innovation that our engineers are used to. So that, in a very, in a nutshell, that's sort of our little story that we were able to do in Winnipeg here over the last 12 to 14 months.
Martin, little story. I think that's a pretty big story. Now, you made it sound like, oh, it was pretty smooth, but we all know it is full of challenges. Can you share some of the challenges that you were faced in this last year?
Yeah, I think a lot of them had to do with a lot of the conception and the understanding that we don't make these things here locally. You can't make them here. We buy them from other countries. We don't have that supply chain developed here. Very, very shortly, we created, and not just ourselves, but many companies, small, medium-sized enterprises like ourselves that are manufacturers, spooled up, worked very hard together, and created a supply chain. Part of the supply chain now is so large in Canada that we can probably supply almost 100% of Canada's demand for instance, for 3-ply masks. That's still not the challenges, is that barrier that buyers and don't even understand that yet, that Manitoba has its own supply chain domestically. And so it's that educational. I think that the growth factor was very difficult to grow at that speed, from management, executive management, right through to production. Our square footprint went from 20,000 square feet to 100,000 square feet over multiple provinces. And so obviously there's huge growth challenges there. And again, being a young, diverse group, there's a lot of talented young engineers here that are willing to work, through the evenings into their weekends. I think that made the biggest difference, really having that drive and motivation to make a difference. And again, the driving factor here, as much as the challenges were large, Mariette, the fact that our focus was, keeping healthcare providers safe and keeping the public safe. I think that was a big motivator, that even though you were tired, you had a very focus on public safety.
You had sort of a bigger issue, a bigger wanting to make a difference somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And I was very impressed when you were speaking to us at first about the growth, because it affects every aspect of a company. I mean, it's not just physical, it's every aspect, and your organizational culture is certainly affected by these huge changes and the big growth. Is there something in particular that you saw within the organizational culture? I know you spoke a little bit about the engineers wanting to, but were there other things that you felt had changed?
Yeah, I think that, obviously from production staff, we came from a niche. We came from high value, lower volume products that were, again, a lot of design. There was long life cycle. We needed to figure out a solution very quickly, rapidly. So when you combine that with the regulatory aspects, when you combine that with, all of a sudden we needed, 50 people on the floor that were all kind of lined up and understood what they were doing. That whole transitioning of training, the transitioning of our culture of what we do here at Precision ADM. And then at the same time, so we were basically, building a bike and we were riding it at the same time the entire way. That literally was happening, and it continues to happen. This is not something that has sort of stopped back last March. We are continuing to do that. So as we are, riding this bike, we are continuing to add components to it, and then obviously getting better at what we do, because it's difficult to just take on an entire new industry, and then just be perfectly optimized. So we are working and improving our systems. So, everything from ERPs to training to onboarding, that entire HR process, we had to really, that's very serious. And I think that a lot of companies potentially don't pay as much attention, but our staff are our company. And without having, having a good policy and procedures in place, it'd be very difficult to do what we did in a short period of time. So luckily we have some talented folks that helped us out.
Well, I'm very, very impressed with this growth. I'm so happy that you were able to see the light, and that you seem to have such a great team. And I think that comes from the leadership. So bravo to you, Martin. And I'll move on to the next person, just to make sure that we flow, and we might be able to have some time for some questions after. But thank you, bravo, Martin, and continue the great work and the growth period you're going through. So bravo. So next one on now, I did give a little bit of an intro to Andréane Muller-Dandenault. Now, she's been in business for quite a while, but just before this whole COVID thing, she actually changed her whole model and her whole name, so to become Anne Muller. And she, through the last year, has certainly had her share of changes, of pivots, and of ways to try and survive and continue flourishing. And she is doing great. So please welcome Andréane Dandenault. Bonjour, Andréane.
Hello, Mariette.
So why don't you give us a little bit your background, your story that I haven't already touched on.
Yeah, so I'm the owner of Anne Muller. Anne Muller is a women's brand right here in Winnipeg. We are a vertical company, which means that we do have our own manufacturer. We outsource the yarn in China in actually organic crops, and then we get it made. The fabric is made in Ontario, and then we get it shipped to Winnipeg, where we cut, sew, design, and retail to the consumer. So we're a direct to consumer. What shifted a lot from last year, we used to do a lot of trade shows. So we traveled across Canada, across the US, and that was 70% of our sales. So we would go to different shows and sell direct to the consumer. So when that stopped, we had to obviously shut down in March, but I started making masks as well. We had customers request, and it was so interesting because it was a very quick shift. And like Martin was saying, it's something that you have no expertise in, but you have to learn very quick how to create. So we started doing that shift, and it actually brought us back in business. And we also had some growth where we had to hire more sewers. The demand was huge. It was a low cost product, but very high demand. So it was this whole shift. But yeah, so now we're mostly an online based brand, but we do have our in-house store here in Winnipeg,
Well, what I'm always impressed with is how you've taken sort of where you come from and your background. I mean, even the design here that I've got that represents our Métis background, and how the whole eco approach to your company. Can you talk a little bit about that, Andréane?
Yeah, so from the start, I always made a point to be a sustainable brand, because I was brought up Métis, which is very connected to Mother Earth, and to respect it. So for me, it was a no-brainer to kind of bring it into the company. And me being a Métis, I wanted to create a nice art that we would embellish on the clothing, but every art has a story. And that for me is very important, because I find fashion and history is very blended together. And so my dad is actually the one that creates a lot of my prints that you see on my clothing. And yeah, so that has the spirit of my ancestor, which is Catherine Muller, which is our maiden name, Mariette. And so what you see on Mariette's jacket right now is actually her original embroidered design, which I want to bring that authenticity, that more original, meaty flower people that we're called. But the whole side of sustainable is because I find it's hand in hand with indigenous roots. We're brought up to take care of the planet, like I said, and I want to make sure that I use sustainable fabrics, sustainable methods. We champion fair trade, fair wages in our manufacture, and all the way to the supply chain. I make sure that our yarn, we have certification where our crops come from. It's organic, slavery free. And that definitely has a challenge because it's hard to demand transparency through supply chain and through suppliers. But it is something that I've always put my foot down and continue to do all these years.
Yeah, that must be hard to know exactly sometimes the reality behind that, right? So have you ever come up with a challenge like that where, Andriane, you really wondered, geez, is this really sustainable, and is this as pure as they say they are?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, we've dealt with some suppliers where they couldn't be transparent, and so it becomes a decision where can you wake up in the morning and still be proud of your company or not? And those pinpoints or those forks, it makes me make a decision. Do I continue with this supplier or not? Because at the end of the day, it's your reputation. Your customers will come back to you and say, you said this, or you're advocating for this, but you can't back it up. So for me, I'm a huge believer in having truth and backing up what I say. So yeah, I've definitely had to say no and kind of walk away from other suppliers if they couldn't supply me with the correct, with this transparency.
Good for you. That's not an easy decision sometimes because the dollar at the end of the day. Now, lately I've been reading about from La Liberté and the French the journal about your expansion to different sizes and stuff like that. Can you talk to us a little bit about that last pivot that you've been embarking on?
Yeah, so with this whole pandemic, we shifted from trade shows to mask, and then from mask, I've always wanted to extend my sizing chart and create fabric for all women. So at that point, we also realized everything went more online. So I thought this was a perfect opportunity to expand our sizing chart. So we went through all the process of doing our development and research, and launched this year our extended sizing. I find that it's very important because of now we can't actually go to the trade show, but I want to be able to supply to all body shapes and forms. So, and everything's more online too. So we're actually working, our big shift and huge learning curve has been online, which we had a nice platform before, but now we're actually working really hard. Even have a brother that has a IT company, so I'm very lucky. But we're working on more customization because I find that's the future for clothing. That's all part of the sustainable world. Is if you can find something that fits better, fits right, then you'll wear it more often. And just the lengths of a sleeve, lengths of a pant, getting it shortened for your height. All things like that really add to the value of a clothing. So we've this year we've added our extended size, and we're gonna add more customization options on our website too.
Oh, good. Now that's fantastic, and I believe that people are looking for quality as opposed to quantity. I think one of the things we've seen in the last year is people are wanting to make sure that where they're spending their money is supporting something they believe in. And also quality, high quality. So you definitely meet those expectations for sure, Andréane. So bravo. So just again, to allow everyone to have a good chance to speak, I'm going to go to the next victim, John Sparrow from Go Oil. So John, great story again, and perfect timing with all this changes in the last year with COVID. So why don't you give us an idea about your company and what you've been through, and give us the story.
Yeah, so my name is John Sparrow. I founded Go Oil 3 years ago, and we provide mobile vehicle maintenance at your home or work. Obviously, more home now with COVID, and it's a company that we ended up franchising. Started to franchise before COVID, and when the pandemic really hit, obviously our sales went down as there's not enough people driving. And people were unsure, so we kind of adapted, doing a bunch of free oil changes for frontline workers and stuff like that across the country for about 2 months, and then things started picking up really quickly. We realized that there's a big market opportunity for us to grow during this pandemic, so we doubled down on franchising. As of today, we're coast to coast in Canada, and we just registered our U.S. company, and our U.S. lawyers are just finishing all of our agreements for the U.S. and should have our first location opened up hopefully by early July. But yeah, we've had a crazy amount of growth. I think people have really seen they've taken their decisions in their own life. They can't necessarily rely on a job or a company anymore. They need to work for themselves. So we've had a huge boom in applications. Right now, Go Oil receives anywhere from 10 to 20 new franchise applications a day. So we have a team of 4 people here in Winnipeg that literally are just sitting there screening, as we want to make sure we only bring on the partners we would like. But there's a huge increase in people wanting to start their own business, and we're definitely riding that wave and that growth curve with it. So right now, obviously, we're expanding to the U.S., Canada. We're finishing out our reach and our expansion here, and we're continuing to onboard clients. Like, over the summer, we started working with Amazon in Western Canada, and there are different courier companies that they're using and rolling out services to them, increasing our at-home service. So we're growing in a lot of different ways. We're adding a lot of team members, not necessarily all in Winnipeg anymore. We just gave up our lease. We ended our lease at our office after 2 years of being there, and everybody's working from home right now. So we're evaluating where we are right now and where most of our staff are across the country, where we need to be. A lot of us are tied down here in Winnipeg, but we're just trying to be strategic on what we do in the coming months and how we plan for the U.S. and where our support centers will be.
So John, you went through it pretty quickly, but I really want to make sure that everybody that's listening understands your business model. So I've got a car and I want an oil change. So what do I do?
Yeah, so it's just like ordering, just as easy as ordering food. You can skip the dishes. You just go to our website or app, and it'll ask you instantly for your vehicle. It'll give you an instant price. At Go Oil, we believe in like the no upsell policy. Our industry is traditionally a very negative experience when you go to get an oil change or vehicle service at one of our competitors, and we really want to make it a positive experience. So what you book online is what you get. All our staff, you'll get fired if you upsell. Like it's pretty intense. So we just have this no upsell policy, no pressure. We're in your driveway, we're on your property, we're servicing your vehicle. Nothing we ever find is 911. Can always be done another day. So we treat customers with the best respect that we can, and we're really long-term focused with having them. So you just book online. You can prepay or you can pay on site when we show up, and it's pretty contactless, free oil change. And yeah, we service thousands of vehicles across the country now, from coast to coast. So today I'm in Kingston, Ontario, delivering another van, and next week I'll be in Lethbridge, and the week after I'll be back in Ontario. So I unfortunately have traveled over 80,000 kilometers during this pandemic, and I've seen every part of this country, and I've experienced every government's different rules and regulation. It's an experience, and it's a map to get around Canada right now.
I hope you kept a journal and something to share one day. So you're saying that going for oil changes is not as fun as going shopping to Anne Mulaire, right? Is that what I heard? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not as fun. But you can go shopping and we'll do your oil change at the same time at home. So.
There you go. There's the hook right there. So thank you so much. Again, for the purpose of time, I will go to our next guest just to make sure everybody gets a chance to give the spiel, and then we'll come back with more stories from each of you. So next one is Nate Caston from Gray and Ivy. Now, Nate is going to tell you the story, and I just love listening to Nate because I can see that there's a depth with him that it's about something greater than himself. And I really enjoyed finding out more about you, Nate. So the floor is yours.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Maria. That's a very nice intro. Yeah, it's been the craziest year of my life, to be frank. I'm an architect by trade, and Gray and Ivy is actually my second business. So I founded F Block Architecture in 2015 with some pretty amazing partners, and thought that was my dream and goal, and that I'd sort of achieved that. And literally upon this crazy thing called the pandemic, when it arose, it literally created this sky is falling effect on our business. We saw everything, all our cash flow and everything started to freeze up, and it was this panic mode. And all of a sudden, I was working at home at the same time, and I had my kids at home, like many people. And I realized right away I needed to keep them busy. I needed to focus on my architecture firm and make sure that we could keep that afloat. So they were asking me all these questions about the pandemic, why they couldn't see their parents, why they couldn't see their friends, why they weren't in school, literally why they couldn't pick up a Winnipeg rock when we were out for a walk. That all of a sudden became this danger thing. I was like, hey, let's keep these kids busy. Why don't we design and build a playhouse together? But instead of me designing and building this playhouse with my girls, I would get them to design and build the playhouse. And as soon as I said that, as soon as I mentioned that to them, they literally lit up more than I've ever seen in my life. And we've given our kids as much as we possibly can, and their grandparents spoil them and everything. Yet everything just sort of shows up on their plate. And this was the first time that they actually sort of clicked that they could actually create something and make something from their mind. And I figured instantly that this was this really amazing way to connect to people's individual creativity, and the spirit of their story could start to translate into something like a playhouse. And as soon as we started to go through this process, we realized very quickly that, going out to land was this really amazing experience. We could go into our backyard and we could talk about sun paths and wind patterns and property lines and soils and slope and all these amazing things, history of place, spirit of place, things that we would never talk about with our kids because they just sort of become part of the background noise in a lot of ways. But this created this really amazing opportunity. At the same time, I was like, hey, just start drawing, just start making stuff, just like literally just keep yourselves busy so I can do my stuff. And they started to draw these really amazing things. They started to just get all their ideas on the paper as much as they could, and they would start to draw this amazing combination of like plan section elevation, all these different ideas from like their Paw Patrol or their sports or their friends and all this stuff. And it started to create this really great connection between themselves, the land, and the making of something. So I just went through this process over and over, and eventually created this sort of systematic, step by step, level by level approach where almost anyone could design and build a playhouse. And we had this really amazing technology that we had discovered through our architecture firm and through our partners at the Manitoba Construction Sector Council and MITT and other partners, where they had virtual reality and augmented reality career awareness and training tools available. And I was like, holy man, like we have all this technology in our architecture firm. Why don't we combine this with the technology of these organizations have? And as soon as I had this process, this step-by-step process that could allow these anyone to basically design and build stuff, I was like, now we have this almost like a video game. We can package all this stuff up into this process that becomes this really engaging, really fun way to actually teach people the design and build process. And because architecture almost literally touches on every sector of the economy, of the environment, of the social situations and cultural situations, that became our balancing parameter. So looking at sustainability, like Andriana had mentioned, the sustainability and storytelling, like those are paramount to the balancing of what it is to create something. And if you can balance, environmental, economic, cultural, and social sustainability within the development of housing, well, now you translate all of that experience, all that knowledge, all that education away from just the consultant, and you put it in the hands of those who actually want to and take control of their own housing. So you can imagine the value that that could create in the education system, and in particular in communities where housing is a major crisis like now, like Indigenous communities. But this is really for anyone, because the design build of playhouses or tiny homes, or that design build process where you connect an idea in your head to the industry through budget, schedule, process, back and forth, sort of circular, in and out, all that sort of stuff, is really just an ecosystem. And as soon as you can teach everyone and understand all that, it really gives context to the entire ecosystem, and can put really any part of the education system or any part of your own personal creativity or cultural beliefs, values, and needs. All that gets embedded into this process. And because we're building the technology, it literally is being designed so that you do this yourselves. There's not enough architects in the world to go out and teach this, so we need to create the system, the process where we can teach communities and organizations, schools, school boards, all these different groups, how to go through this process themselves and make it really fun and something that they can integrate into their everyday lives. So that is really quickly in a nutshell what Green Ivy is.
So Nate, when would that become available? Like, let's say I'm a parent and I'm thinking, wow, I would love to have this with my kids. Everything you've explained about, understanding wind and solar and land and how this all works together around the playhouse. So just that part, can you tell us a little bit what's the future, or what are you looking at the next step, or when can that become available?
Absolutely. So right now we're basically doing a market penetration strategy, which is actually to offer our teaching services just with our team. We've got this really amazing team, and if you want to talk about anything that's been the benefit of pandemic, it's being able to access talent from all over the country and locally at the same time, but really sort of harvest their amazing talents and energy to create these things. So we currently, right now, we're basically meeting with educational groups, colleges, universities, architecture firms, schools, you name it, to basically bring the process to these schools and to these communities, and then develop the technology along with them, so that we make sure that we have the tech that resonates with them and isn't just something that's built in a black box and then put out. Our first build of the app is actually going to be available in the summer, but it's primarily just the storytelling app right now. So it's the ability to basically go out and be prompted with questions about your history, your culture, your community, and then you go and gather information in your community like a scavenger hunt and on the internet, and that basically formulates this story that gets, you can imagine like a Pinterest board. It starts to create this story of what it means to sort of design and build something. And then that we're developing, we've already got the AR technology that'll be able to push out, so that once you develop the basis for what the meaning of your playhouse or tiny home is going to be, then we can start to develop the 3D modeling and the drawing tools that you can then push out into augmented reality. You can place it in your backyard, you can place it in a field, and all your friends can go and walk around all each other's playhouses. So that one's going to be out probably, or the sort of augmented reality version of that is going to be more likely in September. And that's when it'll be commercially available to families and that sort of thing. But the storytelling app is going to start right away. And then, like I said, we're going to do our educational programs in the meantime. And we're just going to keep growing it, because it has no limit of its possibilities. And that's kind of the realities of architecture too. You always have a new problem to solve. You always have a new story to tell. So the development of the technology really just grows over time and just becomes better and better and better.
Okay, so September. I have this funny feeling you're not going to go back to your normal architect job, I suspect.
No, this is I've committed. So I sold my shares to my partners and went all in on this, because I actually felt that like as an architect, you're always sort of chasing, and we had talked about this before, Maria, you're always sort of chasing the next contract, and you're sort of chasing the bigger contract, and you're always sort of adding stress to everything you do. And it's an amazing profession, and it's very rewarding in that regard. But what happens is you're always pushing the last 5% all the time. Like you're at 95%, you're just buzzing and you're pushing that 5%. And what I realized with the pandemic, or what slapped me in the face actually, was if I slow down and use all the knowledge that I've gained throughout my life and actually just sort of think about how I want to impact the world, I can make a much bigger difference. And that's where Gray and Ivy really started to really take or to add value to my life. I was now spending all my time with my kids as opposed to literally paying $1,000 a month to get daycare. Now I get to be with my kids. They inspire me. They get me to play more instead of work more, and that creates this amazing dynamic. And I literally turned my life into a business. So that yeah, I'm not going back. No way. We will do architecture eventually, but as a result of the knowledge that we gain from this, so it'll be sort of this eventual transition from all the stuff we do here will then start to translate into buildings again, but we'll wait on that one.
Thank you, Nate. That was a great story. I love hearing it. I've heard there's some themes that come out. Like for example, when Martin spoke about, you know, the bigger picture about the health and making a difference there, and Andréane around the eco sustainability, the heritage, where you come from, and then Jonathan around the no upselling, like making sure that the customer is always. John was saying that about the not wanting to sell more to the customer, get the customer to be satisfied with what you're doing, and always want to go back because they never feel ripped off, right? And then the creativity and education part that Nate you spoke about, and some of you have mentioned things that I almost feel as if, and Nate especially at the end, you found a lot of positives in this whole COVID time. This last year, you found some positives, and I'd like to hear from each of you. What would be your number one positive? I heard some, but either repeat them or add, because I think that's what we want to do today. Is we want to really show that, you know, we can be inspired by certain things. You know what they say, crap happens, something like that. And so, or okay, lemons and lemonade, something like this. And all of you have made some lemonade. And I'm just wondering what lemonade do you really want to keep? Because we've seen some changes in our everyday life. And what is it that you feel? So I'm going to start with John Sparrow. If you want to just talk a little bit of what did you appreciate?
I guess I appreciated like our staff, everybody that's been around our company. Like with the pandemic, they could have just checked out, went home, sat on COVID benefits and not work. But every single one of them kind of like dove in and said, let's make the worst thing to happen in my generation. Because we're all like 24 to 20, 27 at the office. So this is probably the worst thing that happened in our lifetime. But let's make it one of the biggest opportunities. So I really appreciate how our staff have jumped on board and went full ahead with this.
Right, and you've also talked about going country to country, and I think Nate also mentioned accessing talent from everywhere, which makes a big difference. I see it as I think you, John, you probably benefited from that too.
Also traveling, like it's different traveling during COVID. Like I'm in Kingston today. Obviously, you can't do anything. I'm just between my hotel and dropping off vans. But it's cool seeing the country. You can't do anything, but like, yeah, spent a lot of time in Vancouver over the summer. It was great.
Right. So how about you, Martin? Anything to add around what was the benefits of the positive?
I guess to echo some of John's comments as well. So our team, the kind of camaraderie, the teamwork, the effort. I mean, none of this could have been, would have happened at all with the folks that we have, but also extend this to the immediate community. So shared health, the Winnipeg Regional Health, the nurses, the doctors that all work there. That we've never had that very strong communication, right? Because you typically buy healthcare products outside the country. This forced us to look internally here. So and to depend on each other, and that depending on each other, that was been probably one of the largest positives, because this depending on each other locally in Manitoba, even with the government of Manitoba, it created this focus for, okay, we got to figure out a solution. That solution then becomes, how can we create solutions for all Canadians? So it comes from just the, people have, working very, very hard at solving problems together. So that camaraderie, that kind of being able to meet these challenges, because we know we couldn't depend on others. We had to figure out a solution, but now we start depending on, it's not just Precision, the folks here. Again, it's the bigger ecosystem. It's the Manitoban mentality is to figure things out and to, do things very lean in a very lean time. So I think that was very, very impressive. That is honestly the network that has been now generated has reached beyond Precision and beyond Manitoba borders. We are now part of an entire not-for-profit organization called CAPM, which has now brought industry, this entire PPE, and kind of looking at domestic security around this whole pandemic issue, that it never happens again, where we might be short and our healthcare workers are going to be protected. So there's been so much positive actually from that perspective. We haven't been able to understand. We're going to learn. I think we're still kind of realizing it, but I think that this benefit will continue to benefit, and we'll have an entire industry that didn't exist here from before the pandemic. So I think there's some positives there too.
Martin the optimist, very good. Thank you so much. Adrienne, how about you? What would be one or two things that you find that really that was positive?
Well, I was thinking about that, and what comes to my mind the most is the community. So I think the shift when the pandemic hit, I was floored with how much the community came to support, and we just kept seeing that more and more supporting. Customers coming and say, I'm coming to see you because I want to support you, and I want to support Manitoba and businesses. And I find even on the social media, everything's very more local. And I think it's the fact that conversation is happening, supporting local, which is always great for each provinces. It's always support your local, your neighbors. So that has been very, very, very positive. But also I find another positive aspect is that when something changes, it kind of, as an entrepreneur, you have to stop, and it allows you to really think, what am I going to do? And for me, it made me think, okay, take a moment and reassess. And what I thought last year and the years before is we were just kind of on a, how do you say that? Like, you just keep doing the same thing. And sometimes I needed this one thing to happen to reiterate creativity in my business, and to kind of also stop and listen to demands, to customers. And I find entrepreneur, that's what we do. We should listen to our customers, listen to the community, and answer demands. And so I think for me, this was a positive way, because I was able to create that inclusivity line. I was able to create masks for a massive amount of US and Canadian customers. I was able to stop and reassess our production line, make it more transparent. So if I'm going to say anything for entrepreneurs out there, is when things like this happen, or you find a little nick, it's just to stop and just reassess, because it gives you this little moment of, take it slow.
Get off the little wheel of the hamster, for sure. And I think that's what Nate spoke about. I know certainly you mentioned being able to spend more time with your kids, and discovering something completely off of what your normal trajectory was. Is there something else that you would add to kind of the positive that you've seen in here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from a business perspective or an entrepreneur's perspective, one of the most amazing things was this ability to reach anyone almost anytime. I could literally send an email and be on a Zoom call and book calls back to back. So I could meet with like 10 people a day and get really important insight that, these are really busy people normally, and they just wouldn't have the time. And all of a sudden they were available to connect with and really provide some great guidance. One of the more sort of socially broad things that I think is really important to mention, that has been a net positive, although it's a bit of a unfortunate situation, is just shining the light on the disparity between communities and those who have access to technology and everything. And we as an architect, we worked in the social environment all the time, so we'd see this massive disparity, but it was always a hard thing to describe and explain to folks. But as soon as this pandemic happened, in an unfortunate way, those disparities became priority. They became very apparent. And I think that that's the next challenge that we have, is really addressing those and working together as a collective, as everyone sort of pushing in to bring places like Indigenous communities up to the level that they want and are deserve, in a way that is reflective of their own communities, and really shine a light on making that equality and access to opportunity something that's available to everyone, not just available to those who have access to tech. So that's something that's really important to us and really important to the groups that we work with, is really trying to bring equality and empowerment across the board for those who don't have it. So even in urban environments where there's this massive disparity from people who don't have access to a computer, for example, and have to do home learning, this is a major challenge that I think we as a society have the ability to address. And this did shine a pretty big light on it. So that's in a weird way, a big positive for all this.
Yeah, you're right. Sometimes it's those kinds of things that, bring light to things that are important that we should notice. So all good. I see that Chuck's coming back in, but I've heard growth from you guys. I've heard a lot of innovation, big time, love it. Going into different markets. So just as the World Trade Center, as you know, we do have a interesting webinar coming up, which is those of you who want to go through to the United States, the border crossing. It's on the 27th of May. So I want to just plug that in because it could really be helpful to those of you thinking, well, I'm not sure what it takes. So we'll be working with NLP lawyers for the whole legal part, the GHY for the whole brokerage services, BDO for the whole tax, the Canada Border Service Agency, and the U.S. Customs Border. So these are all really helpful tools. And we also have a whole bunch of webinars. Like, check it out. It might really be beneficial for you. So I just thought I'd throw that in before I get cut off. And I want to say merci beaucoup, Miigwech. Thank you so much for all of you for participating. Your stories are inspiring, and that's what I really wanted to have come out today, and you've done that exactly perfectly. Alors, merci beaucoup, and enjoy the next growth and the next normal, as Chuck likes to put it. So merci beaucoup, and thank you. Au revoir.
Thank you to everyone for taking part this morning. What great stories, and and so many takeaways. I know just from listening to the various stories, and specifically my takeaway is from Nate. When he made the comment in terms of sometimes you just got to slow down and think about what you want to do and how you want to change the world. Like, what a great message for business owners out there, to just the impact that you guys have been able to have on your own province. A huge kudos to all of you, and thank you very much for taking part in today, and to Mariette as well. Thank you very much for one. I know you were so close to swearing on a couple of occasions, and I'm glad you held back, because you don't do that in person. And secondly, you really upped your logo game as well. You came in hard on your logos. I'm gonna have to add a couple more to mine. So a big thank you to everyone, and great for kicking off, and some great success stories as well. So thank you to Nate, John, Andrian, and Martin for those inspiring sessions. Great Manitobans, and great in terms of what you're doing to support local as well. Another strong message. So huge thank you to all of you.